Imagine, if you will, a man forced to make videos about spooky things as a means to avoid dealing with his severe emotional issues, his strange infatuation with ducks, and a sexual attraction towards cheese and baked goods. A man who's about to find himself on a desolate highway with a sign up ahead which reads, "Let's get spooky." Other than scary stories to tell in the dark, what really brought that horror element into my upbringing was the classic horror and science fiction series, The Twilight Zone. My dad had purchased the entire series on VHS when I was a kid, and when I wasn't locked in the basement forced to sort potatoes by size and smell, I was busy popping in those tapes with my next stop being The Twilight Zone. Oh, the series was created by Rod Serling, a former parachuter for the US Army during World War II, who turned to writing after the war as a means of coping with his PTSD. Which, a neat little bit of trivia is that Serling almost didn't make it into the military due to his height. The little guy was only 5'4", which is still 6 inches taller than Danny DeVito, so, there's that, I guess. So, Rod Serling spent the following years after the war writing scripts and sending them off and seeing moderate success. But it wasn't until 1958 when Serling got his big break, when CBS purchased a script for a pilot entitled The Time Element, in which a World War II veteran tells his therapist about these dreams he's been having, where he tries to warn people about the attack on Pearl Harbor before it happens. And then we find out that these might not be dreams after all. Oh man, I bet that guy was actually going back to Pearl Harbor. So after that, with the success of The Time Element, CBS told Serling to make them more money. And then 1 year later, the first episode of The Twilight Zone entitled Where Is Everybody aired, in which a man finds himself alone in a town, only to find out that it's a military experiment, and that's kind of the theme of many episodes. Something spooky happens, then it turns out that it's just the government being real dicks, or aliens. But these stories were a way for Serling to tell the stories that he wanted to hear and bring awareness to these topics. Cold War anxieties, racial tensions, and other social issues to the masses through the then relatively new medium of television. And this was perfectly captured in the classic episode The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, in which everyone's power in this neighborhood mysteriously goes off as the resulting paranoia rips the community apart, which is a statement on the McCarthyism Red Scare of the time, in which your own neighbor could be working for the enemy and you wouldn't even know. But unfortunately, the series saw a drop in quality over the years until it was eventually canceled in 1964. And that was the last we heard of The Twilight Zone until the movie was released in 1983. It featured 3 remakes of the series episodes, 1 original story, and a pretty cringy intro starring Dan Aykroyd for some reason.
Hey, you want to see something really scary?
You bet.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, this is really, really scary now.
I trust you.
Okay, pull the car over.
Pull the car over? Ooh.
You want to see it?
Well, show me while I'm driving.
No, I can't. I can't tell you about it. It's only take a couple of seconds.
All right, 2 seconds, okay?
Okay.
What is it?
Just pull it over.
Okay.
I'll show you.
All right.
Okay.
Scare me.
Are you ready?
Okay, go ahead. What are you doing?
What the fuck was that? And honestly, the movie was terrible. The remakes of It's a Good Life and Nightmare at 20,000 Feet weren't spectacular. They felt like watered down versions of the originals, only with 80s special effects in lieu of a compelling narrative, which made it feel more cheesy than scary, and made me wish I was just watching the originals instead. And then there is the confusing choice to remake Kick the Can, which is about a bunch of old people playing a game of Kick the Can. Spooky. I mean, you could have chosen any story to remake. Living Doll, Eye of the Beholder, To Serve Man, and you choose Kick the Can. Knock the crap off. And then there was the original story, which is by far the worst and most heartbreaking entry, Time Out, which during the filming of this segment, a horrible on-set accident involving a helicopter killed the main actor, Vic Morrow, as well as 2 child actors. I mean, does it even matter what the story was about? And then 2 years later, in 1985, The Twilight Zone was brought back for an all-new series. Did you know that? Now you do. It was cancelled after 3 seasons. Which is honestly a little sad, since it always gets swept under the rug when discussing The Twilight Zone. It had a slew of adaptations from great writers like Stephen King and Richard Matheson, as well as starring the likes of Bruce Willis and Morgan Freeman, but it unfortunately never got the recognition that it deserved. And that was the last we heard of The Twilight Zone until 2002, when it was brought back yet again for a cool, sleek new version, featuring a new rocking theme from Jonathan Davis of Korn, as well as a hunky heartthrob Forrest Whitaker taking over the role of narrator. Meow. I watched this series when it first aired, and personally, I really enjoyed it. I mean, there were some duds. A lot of duds. However, it did address the issues of racism and prejudice in a story about a white man stepping into a black man's shoes, who he refused to help and seeing the consequences of his prejudices, as well as an interesting sequel to It's a Good Life, entitled It's Still a Good Life, which follows the daughter of Anthony, the little boy from the original. But none of that was able to save it, and was cancelled after 1 season. And things are quiet yet again on the Twilight Zone end until fairly recently, when in 2019, CBS All Access released yet another revival series, developed and narrated by Jordan Peele. And it was okay. Currently sitting at a 47% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Alright, so maybe it was a little worse than okay. And I was so excited when I heard that a reboot was coming and that Jordan Peele was behind it. I love Get Out, so I was expecting something along the same caliber. But what we got instead were a couple interesting storylines, but some of the laziest writing I've ever seen. Like the writers wanted to make a statement first, but forgot how to write a story and just slapped something together last minute. And I'm not dogging on the show for being preachy either. I think it's important to have a message. I don't think it's required, but I do believe it's important, especially when discussing the Twilight Zone and its history of social commentary. But man, you gotta know how to write a story first. You can't just throw a message out there and hope it's enough to carry the story along. It's not. But that's not to say that the legacy of the Twilight Zone dies with this lackluster installment, but its inspiration is felt throughout culture and media. One of the best examples of a current iteration of the Twilight Zone comes in the form of Black Mirror, the Netflix series that generally has a technology-oriented approach to its storytelling. And much like the Twilight Zone, tells social commentary through the lens of science fiction. Episodes like the Waldo Moment, a compelling story which discusses society's disdain for the current political system, in which the people elect a foul-mouthed cartoon character as their leader. An episode which was almost prophetic in its commentary, airing 3 years before something similar happened, when America elected Donald Trump as its president. So whether we see the Twilight Zone again, or if we're just stuck with its legacy living on through other shows, is unknown. But I feel like if the Twilight Zone is brought back, it needs to go back to its roots. Or as strange as this may sound, look to the successful series that it inspired as a way to move forward. So, with that being said, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And don't forget to stop by next time as we discuss the best episodes of the original series. And as always, thanks for being spooky.
What are you doing?